Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The serene stillness of the planet's surface shattered when the alien vessel hurtled from the sky, trailing fire and smoke like a comet doomed for extinction. The ship, a sleek and advanced craft from a far-flung star system, had been struggling to maintain its course for several hours after an unexplained system malfunction. Now, it descended uncontrollably through the dense atmosphere of the uninhabited world, a planet known only for its toxic atmosphere and hostile wildlife. This was no place for a crash landing, but the alien captain had little choice but to fight for survival. Inside the wreckage, a woman, a tall, lithe creature with translucent, shimmering skin and deep violet eyes, lay unconscious, trapped in a twisted mass of metal and crushed panels. She was the sole survivor of the disaster, and yet her injuries left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her mind drifted in and out of consciousness, as waves of pain surged through her battered body, and she struggled to focus on her surroundings. Meanwhile, on a nearby colony station, Nathan Hartwell, a human engineer and ex-soldier, had just finished his shift repairing a broken generator. The station had been eerily quiet for days, with only the hum of machinery and the occasional transmission coming from the scientific research vessels orbiting the planet. Nathan had learned to appreciate the solitude after years of serving in various military deployments across the galaxy. But today, something felt different. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as a sudden, inexplicable sense of urgency gripped him. He glanced up at the stars through the observatory's glass dome, sensing a disturbance in the cosmos. A loud beeping interrupted his thoughts. It was an emergency distress signal, coming from a location beyond the planet's surface. Nathan scrambled to his terminal, his heart pounding as he traced the signal's source. His eyes widened in disbelief. A ship was down, an alien ship, and it was less than 10 miles from his location. With the calm precision of someone used to dealing with high-stress situations, Nathan gathered his gear. He didn't wait for authorization, he never did. His mind already racing through the options, he grabbed his toolkit, an old combat rifle for safety, and a survival pack. His instincts kicked in. He knew how dangerous alien planets could be, especially those that weren't well charted by the colonies. Without a second thought, he boarded his personal Land Rover, a rugged all-terrain vehicle, and set off toward the crash site. The journey was uneventful for the first few miles, but as Nathan drew closer to the coordinates, the terrain became more treacherous. Sharp, jagged rocks and dense patches of toxic flora impeded his progress. The vehicle's headlights illuminated the wreckage ahead. Nathan slammed on the brakes as he saw the smoldering remains of the alien craft, its hull scorched and blackened by the crash. The ship had been mangled beyond recognition, half buried in the dirt and debris. Nathan quickly disembarked, his boots crunching on the brittle ground. He could see that the ship's engines had exploded on impact, leaving nothing but twisted metal and fire. As he approached cautiously, his eyes scanned the wreckage. There, partially hidden beneath a large piece of shattered metal, he saw her, a woman, her pale purple skin streaked with dirt and blood, her legs twisted at odd angles. He knelt beside her, his breath catching in his throat. The sight of her alien form was stunning, her face framed by long, silvery hair that shimmered faintly in the low light. Yet her condition was dire. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, her body unmoving except for the subtle twitch of her fingers. "Hang in there," Nathan murmured to himself as he quickly assessed her injuries. Her body was broken in several places, her back severely damaged. There was no sign of any immediate bleeding, but her pulse was faint, and she appeared to be in shock. He had no time to waste. He needed to stabilize her before her injuries became fatal. His fingers moved quickly, pulling out a medkit from his pack, his hands steady despite the gravity of the situation. As he worked, Nathan couldn't help but feel a strange sense of responsibility wash over him. He'd dealt with plenty of wounded soldiers and civilians in his years, but an alien? That was a first. She was so unlike anything he had encountered before. Her smooth, iridescent skin seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and yet she was utterly helpless, trapped in a wreckage that had likely claimed the lives of her crew. Nathan was not one to hesitate. He applied a stabilizing bandage to her neck and administered a sedative, hoping to ease her pain. Carefully, he began to lift her injured form, gritting his teeth as he adjusted her body, mindful of the fragile bones and the fragile life he was trying to preserve. His heart pounded in his chest as he made the decision to move her. He couldn't wait for a rescue team. The planet's hostile environment and the damage to the ship would make it nearly impossible to retrieve her anytime soon. He cradled her gently in his arms, his mind working over the best course of action. There was no way he could get her back to the station with his Land Rover in one piece. But his emergency beacon still worked. Nathan activated it, sending out a call for immediate assistance. As he carefully loaded the alien woman into his rover, he knew he was facing the most critical task of his life. The human engineer and the alien survivor were about to embark on a journey none of them could foresee. A journey that would change both of their lives forever. The ride back to the colony station was slow and cautious. Nathan kept one hand on the steering wheel of his Land Rover, the other resting protectively on the alien woman he had saved. She lay across the passenger seat, her body wrapped in the medical gear he'd applied in a desperate attempt to stabilize her. The sedative had put her into a deep, dreamless sleep, but Nathan knew it was only a temporary solution. Her injuries were far too severe, and she had little time before her body would begin to succumb to the damage. Every second counted. His mind was racing as he navigated the rugged terrain, the wheels of his rover grinding over the uneven ground. The planet's atmosphere was thick with a yellowish fog, the air heavy with toxic gases that made it nearly impossible to breathe without the proper equipment. The station, a small outpost for research and engineering projects, was still several kilometers away, and the longer he was out here, the more dangerous it became for both of them. He glanced down at the alien woman's serene face. Her eyes, closed tightly in unconsciousness, were an alluring shade of violet, and her high cheekbones and delicate features made her appear almost ethereal. Despite her otherworldly appearance, Nathan could sense a certain vulnerability in her, a stark contrast to the fearsome, technologically advanced species she came from. He couldn't shake the feeling that, in some inexplicable way, he had crossed paths with fate. The colony station was small, but it had the necessary equipment to stabilize a wounded person, human or otherwise. Nathan had no illusions about the woman's chances. He wasn't a doctor, and even the station's medical facilities had their limits. But she was alive, and for now that was enough. The journey felt like it took an eternity, and when Nathan finally saw the lights of the station in the distance, his heart skipped a beat. He maneuvered the rover into the docking bay, a low rumble echoing through the metal structure as the vehicle came to a stop. He hurried to the back, lifting her carefully from the seat. The weight of her body was heavier than he had expected, and for a moment he faltered, his arms straining under the effort. But the thought of leaving her out here, vulnerable and alone, pushed him forward. He moved quickly through the station's entrance, calling out to the staff on duty. A few engineers looked up in confusion, but Nathan barely acknowledged them. His only focus was the woman he carried in his arms. He rushed down the sterile white hallways, his boots echoing loudly against the metal floors, until he reached the medical bay. Dr. Amelia Rivers, the station's chief medical officer, was on call. She was a seasoned veteran, calm under pressure, with years of experience in handling off-world injuries. She took one look at Nathan and the alien woman in his arms and immediately stepped into action. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steady but full of concern as she moved to prepare the medical bed. "Crash," Nathan said shortly, setting the woman down onto the bed. "She's paralyzed from the waist down, severe internal injuries. I did what I could, but," he paused, catching his breath. "She needs immediate attention." Amelia nodded, her trained eyes already scanning the woman's battered form. The alien's body, though seemingly delicate, was unlike anything Nathan had ever seen. The faint iridescent shimmer that ran beneath her skin had started to dim, her body's natural glow fading as the shock took its toll. "I'll need you to step back," Dr. Rivers said, her hands moving expertly as she connected the medical equipment. Nathan took a step back, reluctant to leave, but understanding. She was in good hands now. Still, there was a gnawing uncertainty in his chest that wouldn't go away. As the doctor worked, Nathan leaned against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. He had always been a practical man, preferring to focus on the task at hand rather than dwelling on feelings or the unknown. But there was something about this woman, something that didn't sit right. He had saved her. Yes, but what did that really mean? She was alien, not just in appearance but in ways he couldn't even begin to comprehend. She could be dangerous for all he knew. Her species could be hostile. Or worse, they could be involved in something he didn't understand. But there was another part of him, a part he hadn't recognized before, that couldn't let go of the image of her. Fragile, hurt, and completely dependent on him. Despite the unknowns, he felt responsible for her survival, and the need to protect her overwhelmed his logical mind. Dr. Rivers finally stepped back from the medical table, wiping her brow. "She's stable for now," she said, "but we'll need to keep her under observation for the next 24 hours. There's a lot of trauma here. The spinal injury is severe. She'll need extensive treatment. The paralysis may be permanent if we can't reverse the damage." Nathan nodded grimly, not surprised by the diagnosis. "I'll stay with her," he said, his voice firm. "I need to make sure she's okay." Amelia raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Of course," she said. "Just remember, she's not human. We don't know what kind of reactions her body might have to our treatments. Be cautious." Nathan watched the doctor leave, her footsteps fading down the hall. He turned back to the woman on the table, her face still peaceful despite the turmoil her body had endured. For a moment, he allowed himself to study her in silence. What had driven her to this planet? Was she alone, or had her crew been scattered across the surface? What would happen when she woke up? And, more importantly, what role had he unknowingly stepped into by saving her? For now, he only had one task: to keep her alive. But that was easier said than done. The alien woman had a lot more secrets hidden beneath her skin than Nathan realized, and with each passing moment, he felt himself pulled deeper into a mystery that could change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. The next several hours passed in a blur. Nathan sat vigil by the alien woman's side, monitoring the various medical readings that blinked and flickered on the equipment around her. The soft hum of the medical bay's machinery was the only sound in the room, accompanied by the occasional beeping of a heart rate monitor or the hiss of oxygen being cycled through her system. His mind was restless, his thoughts a whirlwind of questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? The ship she had crash-landed in had been far more advanced than anything the human colonies had. He couldn't even begin to fathom how far her species had traveled or the kind of technologies they wielded. Yet there she was, lying on a sterile table in a human facility, utterly vulnerable. Nathan was a man of action, and he hated sitting idly. But every time he considered trying to explore her origins or uncover more about her species, he found himself pulled back by the reality of her condition. She was alive, yes, but only barely, and as much as his curiosity pushed him, he couldn't abandon her now. The hours stretched on, and with each passing moment, the tension in his chest grew. It wasn't until the first light of dawn, spilling weakly through the station's high windows, that the woman stirred. At first it was a small twitch, a movement of her fingers, followed by a soft groan. Nathan was immediately alert, standing and moving toward her side. He watched intently as her eyelids fluttered open, revealing the same violet hue he had seen the night before. Her pupils contracted against the harsh light, and she blinked several times, confusion clouding her features. "Easy," Nathan said gently, his voice low and soothing. "You're safe. You're on a human station. You've been injured, but you're going to be all right." The woman's gaze shifted to him slowly, her expression filled with a mix of disbelief and wariness. She tried to move, her body stiff with the effort, but she immediately flinched, her face twisting in pain. "Don't," Nathan began, but her soft voice cut through his words. "Where am I?" Her voice was low, strained, and laced with an accent unfamiliar to him. Despite the raspiness, there was a melodic quality to it. Her eyes, wide with confusion, searched his face as if she were trying to place him. "You're on a research station." "A human station," Nathan repeated, careful not to overwhelm her with too much information. He didn't know how much she understood about the human race or the colonies. But he also didn't want her to panic. "Human?" Her brow furrowed slightly, her gaze scanning the room. She appeared disoriented, trying to make sense of her surroundings. Nathan nodded. "Yes, I'm a human engineer. My name's Nathan." She looked at him for a long moment, her violet eyes studying him as if weighing his words. Then her gaze dropped to her legs. Nathan could see the flicker of realization flash across her face as she tried to move them, but her expression darkened as she felt nothing but the dull throb of pain. "My legs." Her voice was shaky now, the disbelief turning to a quiet panic. "What happened?" Nathan hesitated, knowing the weight of the truth. "Your spinal cord was damaged in the crash. I did what I could, but you're paralyzed. For now, at least." The woman went silent, her breathing shallow as she processed the information. A strange calm seemed to settle over her then, though Nathan could see the wariness still lingering in her eyes. "What's your name?" Nathan asked, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. Her eyes flickered again, as if trying to remember something, before she spoke in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "Callus. My name is Callus." Nathan repeated her name, his mind turning it over. Callus. He tried to commit it to memory, to connect it to the fragile figure before him. He had saved her life, but it seemed there was so much more to her than just that. She had come from somewhere far away, a place he couldn't even begin to imagine. And now she was here because of him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Callus's breathing slowed, and Nathan could sense her trying to piece together what had happened, what had brought her to this strange place. The silence stretched uncomfortably between them, the weight of their respective circumstances heavy in the air. "Are you alone?" Nathan asked gently, breaking the silence. Callus's face twisted in pain, her eyes clouded with something like sorrow. "I don't know," she murmured, looking away. I was part of a convoy." But her voice faltered, and she swallowed hard. "I don't remember. It happened so fast." Nathan felt a pang of sympathy for her. It was clear that Callus was struggling with the loss of her ship, her crew, and perhaps something even deeper. There was an unsettling emptiness in her words. She had no answers, no clear memory of her past. She was stranded on this foreign world, in a state of confusion and isolation. "Do you have any way to contact your people?" Nathan asked. "Your species?" Callus shook her head slowly, her expression grim. "Our communications were destroyed in the crash. Even if I could, I don't know where we were exactly. The navigation systems malfunctioned." Nathan nodded, understanding. It made sense. There were too many variables involved in space travel, too many chances for failure, especially with the unknowns that came with alien technology. And now it seemed Callus was alone. "I'll help you," Nathan said before he could second-guess himself. "I don't know what your people need, but I'll get you whatever you can use to survive. You're not alone." Callus turned her head back to him, her violet eyes studying him carefully. There was a moment of silence, and then a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you, Nathan," she said softly. Nathan didn't respond right away, his gaze fixed on her. There was something in her eyes that seemed to acknowledge more than just gratitude. It was a glimmer of something deeper, something that perhaps only those who had experienced loss could understand. And in that moment, as he stood there beside her, he realized that this was no simple accident. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and he didn't know yet what that reason was. But whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't abandon her. He had saved her life. Now, he had to ensure that she survived, in ways far beyond the medical equipment in the room. The days following Callus's awakening passed in a haze of medical treatments, repairs, and awkward silences. Despite the best efforts of Dr. Rivers and the station's medics, Callus's condition remained fragile. While her vital signs had stabilized, the paralysis in her lower body was still unyielding, and the damage to her spinal cord could not be reversed. At least, not with the tools they had on hand. The alien woman remained in the medical bay, her body healing, but her mind wrestling with the reality of her situation. Nathan visited her every day, bringing food, checking her vitals, and offering what little comfort he could. Though she had initially been distant, Callus seemed to grow more at ease with his presence, her wary eyes softening as they exchanged quiet words. She had become accustomed to the strange technology of the station, though her alien body was still struggling with the human environment. The atmospheric conditions were harsh, even in the station's controlled areas, and Callus's species was not designed for such extremes. But she was resilient, far more than Nathan had first anticipated. One evening, Nathan sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the data scrolling across the medical terminal as he reviewed her progress. It had been a long day of maintenance work, and his body ached, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was just beyond reach. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with genuine concern. Callus, who had been staring at the ceiling, slowly turned her head toward him. She offered him a small, faint smile, one that, over the past few days, had become a little less forced. "I'm still in pain, but it's manageable," she replied, her voice flat, yet carrying a subtle weight. "Thank you for everything. I know you have your own responsibilities here." Nathan nodded, but he didn't let her words pass without response. "You're not a burden," he said firmly. "I promised I'd help you, and I meant it. You didn't ask for this. For any of it." Callus fell silent for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the small window that overlooked the dark expanse of space. The stars outside twinkled in their endless distance, a cold reminder of how far she was from home. She seemed lost in thought, her fingers twitching slightly as she absent-mindedly traced the edge of the blanket draped across her lap. I'm not sure I can return to my people," Callus said suddenly, breaking the silence with a quiet vulnerability that Nathan hadn't expected. "Even if I could send a signal, I don't know if they would receive it. I don't even know where I am anymore." Nathan felt a sharp pang of sympathy. He didn't know what it felt like to be lost in the stars, cut off from everything familiar, but he could imagine the crushing weight of it. It was an isolation like no other. "Don't give up yet," he said gently. "I'll help you figure it out. Maybe we can find a way to get a message through. You're not alone, Callus." She looked at him then, her violet eyes wide with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, an unspoken question hanging between them. Nathan wasn't sure if it was hope or just exhaustion, but something in her expression struck him, and for the first time, he noticed a subtle shift in the air between them. "I wonder," Callus said quietly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the station's systems, "if my people would even want to rescue me." Nathan blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, as though unsure how much to reveal. "The convoy I was part of, we weren't exactly on a peaceful mission. We were transporting something classified," a knot twisted in Nathan's stomach. "What was it?" Callus closed her eyes, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I can't say for sure, but whatever it was important enough that they didn't care about the risks. It's possible that someone wanted us to fail." She hesitated before adding, "or wanted me to fail." Nathan's mind RCD. What could she be talking about? This wasn't just an ordinary space mission. There were deeper layers here, layers he hadn't even considered. The weight of her words lingered in the air, thick with implication. "You think someone sabotaged your ship?" Nathan asked, his voice sharp with concern. Callus's eyes flickered with the faintest spark of emotion. "I don't know," she admitted. "I wish I could remember more, but everything is a blur. My species, our minds are linked to the stars, to the ship systems. I can feel the ship's destruction in my bones, like a scar that won't fade. But the memories of what led up to it, they're gone, fading like a dream." Nathan was silent for a long moment, contemplating her words. This was no ordinary crash. The implications of her statement were vast: sabotage, classified cargo, and the possibility of forces beyond her control acting against her. She wasn't just a stranded survivor. She was part of something much larger than either of them could have imagined. "I won't let you face this alone," Nathan said firmly, his voice full of resolve. Whatever happened, we'll find out together. I'll help you recover those memories if I can. And if someone's responsible for this, well, they're going to regret it. Callus seemed to consider his words carefully before nodding slowly. I appreciate your loyalty, but be careful, Nathan. If I'm right, this isn't just about me. There are larger forces at play. My species has enemies. The weight of her words hung in the air between them, thick with the unspoken danger she was hinting at. Nathan had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to sense when things were off, but this was different. Callus wasn't just an injured alien. She was a key to something bigger, something dangerous, and now Nathan was tangled up in it too. I'm used to danger, Nathan replied with a smirk, though he didn't quite believe the bravado in his own words. You've seen the galaxy, right? It's not all peace and prosperity. Callus gave him a small, knowing smile. I have, she said, but I never thought I'd be stranded with someone like you. Nathan's chest tightened at the unexpected warmth in her words. Despite everything, the uncertainty, the danger, the constant threat of the unknown, there was something about Callus that made him feel like he wasn't so alone in this vast, unpredictable universe. And as he stared out at the stars once more, he realized that he had made a choice. He had chosen to help her, to uncover the truth behind her crash. Whatever lay ahead, he wouldn't back down. Not now. Callus's survival wasn't just about her. It was about something far bigger, something that would take them both into the heart of the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of the unknown grew heavier with every passing hour. Callus's condition had stabilized, but her recovery was slow. She had learned to maneuver with a makeshift exoskeleton that helped her regain a bit of mobility, though it didn't erase the pain in her spine or the stark reminder of her vulnerability. Nathan kept up with the maintenance work around the station, but his mind was often elsewhere, preoccupied with the growing mystery surrounding Callus and her mission. He had taken to spending more time with her, sitting by her bedside while she worked through her own fragmented memories. Some of the days were quiet, filled with nothing more than the hum of station machinery and the soft murmur of their conversations. Other days, however, the air between them crackled with tension as Callus's memories began to resurface. They were fragmented, often disjointed, but they gave Nathan small glimpses of the terrifying scale of what they were dealing with. One evening, as the stars outside the station glittered like distant diamonds, Callus sat up in bed, her exoskeleton humming softly as she adjusted the control. Her violet eyes were locked on the screen in front of her, where various data streams from the wrecked convoy ship were slowly being pieced together. Nathan, she said quietly, her voice tense, I've been thinking. The memory gaps, they're not just from the crash. Something's been interfering with my ability to recall certain details. Someone or something doesn't want me to remember. Nathan leaned forward, a feeling of dread settling over him. Interfering? What do you mean? Callus's eyes flickered with a dark realization. The ship, the convoy wasn't just transporting cargo. It was carrying an object, an artifact, one that had been found in a deep space excavation. The artifact, it's a powerful device, ancient and beyond anything we've encountered. It's been the focus of a covert operation within my people's military. Nathan's brow furrowed. An artifact? What kind of device? And why would someone want to keep it hidden? Callus's voice dropped to a whisper, as though the very thought of the artifact was dangerous. It's a weapon that can control not just the minds of individuals but entire fleets. It can manipulate gravitational fields, warp space itself. Whoever controls it has the power to bend entire star systems to their will. My people, we were transporting it to keep it out of the wrong hands. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. A weapon of that scale? A tool that could control fleets, twist reality itself. He had never imagined anything like it. Why would anyone want to stop you from remembering? He asked, his voice tight with concern. Who would go to such lengths? Callus's eyes hardened, the weight of her words heavy in the air. There are factions within my people who want that power for themselves. I don't know who is behind it, but someone sabotaged the convoy. Someone made sure that the crash would happen. And that artifact, It has to be destroyed before it falls into the wrong hands. Nathan absorbed her words slowly, trying to piece together the situation. The stakes had just been raised to an unimaginable level. It wasn't just about saving Callus anymore. It was about preventing an entire galaxy from falling under the control of whoever sought the artifact. And now, Nathan had been pulled into this web of intrigue, danger, and secrecy. "I have to warn you, Nathan," Callus said, her voice urgent now. "The artifact is not just a physical object. It's alive in a way. It has a consciousness, a presence. Whoever controls it doesn't just wield its power, they are connected to it. And it will manipulate them, use them." Nathan's mind was reeling. He had been an engineer, a man who worked with machines, tools, and technology. But what Callus was describing was beyond anything he had ever encountered. A sentient weapon, a living artifact. And now, Callus was telling him that someone had already manipulated the events that led to her crash, as if it were all part of a larger plan. "Where is the artifact now?" Nathan asked, his voice steady despite the rising storm inside him. Callus looked at him, her violet eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "I don't know. When the convoy ship was destroyed, it was scattered across the surface of this planet. My people have been searching for it ever since. But if it's not destroyed soon, it could fall into the wrong hands, human or otherwise." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. If this artifact could manipulate space itself, if it was capable of such power, it would be catastrophic in the wrong hands. The thought of it being used by anyone, even the wrong factions within Callus's species, made his stomach turn. "We need to find it," Nathan said, his voice resolute. "We can't let it fall into the wrong hands. I'll help you find it, Callus. Whatever it takes." Callus studied him carefully, a flicker of something like gratitude passing over her features. "You're willing to help me? Even with everything at stake?" Nathan's eyes met hers. "I didn't sign up for this," he said, his voice low, "but I'm not about to walk away. If I've learned anything in my time in the colonies, it's that no one person should have that kind of power. And that's what this artifact represents. A threat to everyone. We can't let it slip through our fingers." Callus nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. "You're right. The artifact could destroy everything. Not just my people, but yours as well." The silence that followed was thick with the weight of their decision. They were no longer just two strangers caught in the same storm. They were now bound by a shared mission. They had a responsibility not just to each other, but to the entire galaxy. Nathan's mind was already running through the possibilities. The wreckage from the convoy had been scattered, but not beyond reach. They would need to search the planet, track down every piece of the ship that had survived the crash. The task would be dangerous, perhaps deadly. But Nathan was no stranger to danger. And this was bigger than just survival. "This isn't going to be easy," Nathan said, his eyes fixed on Callus as he spoke. "But we're going to find this thing. Together." Callus gave him a faint smile, the first real one he had seen since their initial meeting. Together, then, and so, their journey into the heart of the unknown began. They would face dangers they couldn't yet comprehend, battles against enemies whose faces they hadn't even seen. But for now, their mission was clear: find the artifact. Destroy it before it could claim the galaxy. The planet below them was a sprawling, desolate world. A barren landscape of cracked, dry earth, jagged mountains, and vast plains that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. A toxic atmosphere meant no human settlements had ever been established here, and the station orbiting above it was the closest point of civilization. Nathan and Callus had prepared for the search ahead, each of them harboring their own private thoughts as they stared out of the transport shuttle's small viewport. Nathan gripped the controls, his fingers tight against the ship's surface, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on him. Callus sat in the passenger seat, her exoskeleton clicking softly as she adjusted it. The shimmering violet of her eyes was fixed on the horizon, as though something in the distance was calling to her, or perhaps warning her. "I know this is overwhelming," Nathan said, trying to cut through the tension that seemed to cling to the air between them. "But we'll figure this out. We've got the best tech available. We can track down the wreckage and find that artifact." Callus didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was distant, almost reflective. "It's not just the artifact we need to worry about," she murmured, her eyes now fixed on the barren landscape below. "It's the ones who are already looking for it." Nathan's heart skipped a beat. The realization hit him like a sudden storm. "You mean other factions? From your people?" Callus nodded, her face grim. "Yes. My people aren't the only ones who knew about the convoy. There are other factions, rogue groups who would stop at nothing to get their hands on the artifact. And some of them don't care who they hurt in the process." Nathan's grip on the controls tightened. This wasn't just about the artifact anymore. It was about preventing an all-out war. He glanced over at Callus, who had grown quiet again, lost in the storm of her own thoughts. She had told him everything she could, how the artifact was a living weapon, capable of controlling minds and manipulating space, but there were still pieces of the puzzle missing. Pieces that Callus couldn't remember, or that she didn't fully understand herself. "How do we even begin to find it?" Nathan asked, forcing his thoughts back into the present. The wreckage was scattered all across this planet. No way to know where it went down exactly. Callus's lips pressed together as she thought. "There's a place I remember. I think it's a cave system on the far side of the planet. My people, we used it for hiding important assets. It's heavily shielded against sensors and tracking devices." "Perfect," Nathan said with a half-smile. "That sounds like a good starting point. Lead the way." Callus nodded and tapped a few controls on her wristpad. As the map of the planet appeared on the small screen, she pointed to a location on the map, near the planet's northern pole. It was a remote region, surrounded by dangerous terrain and difficult to navigate, but the cave system was there, hidden from the prying eyes of the surface. They arrived at the coordinates hours later, the shuttle gently descending into a canyon with towering cliffs that loomed ominously above them. The atmosphere outside had thinned enough for the airlock to engage, and Nathan and Callus suited up in their space gear, preparing for the trek ahead. The landscape was eerily quiet, save for the distant rumble of shifting rocks and the occasional gust of wind. The planet's surface seemed hostile, as though nature itself had turned against the possibility of life. Callus adjusted her exoskeleton with practiced ease, her fingers moving over the controls. The device was now a part of her, an extension of her body that allowed her some limited mobility despite her injury. The journey would be taxing, but she was determined to see it through. They both were. As they made their way toward the cave system, Nathan kept a sharp eye on their surroundings. His experience in survival and engineering had taught him how to stay alert in hostile environments, and something about the barren planet felt wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "We need to be careful," he said, his voice low. "If there are other factions on this planet, we could be walking right into a trap." Callus didn't respond immediately, her gaze scanning the horizon. She was quieter now, more intense. The journey had brought back fragments of memories, some disjointed, others sharper than before. The faces of her comrades, the sound of alarms blaring on the convoy ship, the feeling of dread just before the crash. It was as though the weight of her past was closing in on her. "I don't think we're alone," Callus said finally, her voice tense. "I can feel it. Someone else is here." Nathan froze, his senses heightened. He scanned the cliffside, his eyes narrowing as he tried to see any movement, any sign of danger. But the landscape was still, the rock formations almost eerily undisturbed. "Could they be tracking us?" Nathan asked, his tone sharp. "Are there devices we missed?" Callus shook her head, her face set in grim determination. "It's not about tracking. It's about proximity. The artifact, I feel it, Nathan, is close. Almost too close." Nathan's breath hitched, his pulse quickening. He had seen her react this way before when she was under stress, when she was connected to the artifact in ways that even she couldn't fully explain. But the fact that she was sensing it now meant one thing. They were getting close. "Let's keep moving," Nathan said, urgency creeping into his voice. "If we can get to the cave, we might be able to find shelter and gather intel." They pressed forward, moving through the canyon toward the entrance of the cave system. The rocks beneath their boots crunched with each step, the air thick with dust and the heavy weight of impending danger. The cave's entrance appeared in the distance, an almost imperceptible shadow in the rock. As they neared, however, Nathan's instincts screamed that something was wrong. There was no sign of activity, no footprints or signs of movement, but the feeling in his gut told him they weren't alone. It was as if the very stone walls were watching them. "We need to hurry," Callus urged, her voice taut with tension. "They'll be here soon." Nathan didn't need to ask who they were. It was clear. Someone had found them, or at least had been waiting for them. The artifact, the key to all of this, was drawing them closer, and soon they would be face to face with whatever forces were after it. As they reached the entrance to the cave, a strange noise echoed from deeper within. A low, mechanical hum, like the sound of a ship powering up. Nathan exchanged a look with Callus, both of them realizing at the same moment that they had walked straight into a trap. "We don't have much time," Nathan said, the words barely escaping his lips before the ground beneath their feet trembled violently. A blinding light erupted from the cave's depths, and a voice, gravelly and distorted, boomed through the air. The ground trembled again, more violently this time. The air was charged with an unseen force, thick with anticipation. Nathan and Callus stood frozen, their eyes locked on the glowing entrance to the cave, where the light had intensified, almost blinding them. The humming noise from within seemed to vibrate in their bones, as if the very atmosphere had shifted, infused with an unnatural energy. Callus's hand instinctively moved toward her exoskeleton's control panel, her fingers trembling as she activated a protective shield. Nathan felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The voice that had spoken earlier was still echoing in the air, its metallic, distorted tone making his blood run cold. "You should not have come here." It was a warning, final one. Callus's eyes narrowed, the violet glow in her irises flickering. "It's them," she whispered, more to herself than to Nathan. "The rogue faction. They've been tracking us." Nathan swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. "What do they want with the artifact?" he asked, his voice tight. His hands gripped his weapon, though he knew the chances of mere human tech standing up to whatever was waiting inside were slim. "The artifact," Callus said with an edge of disbelief, "is more than just a weapon. It's an amplifier, a source of power. If they control it, they can manipulate space-time itself. The consequences will be catastrophic. For all of us." Before Nathan could respond, a shadow moved in the entrance to the cave. From the darkness, a figure stepped into view, tall and imposing, draped in dark, armored exoskeletons. They wore the insignia of Callus's people, but the design was twisted, corrupted. The uniform was covered in sigils that Nathan didn't recognize, and the individuals beneath the armor moved with predatory precision. "They've already begun the process," Callus muttered, her voice laced with both anger and regret. "They've been using the artifact to amplify their abilities." The figure that had stepped forward raised its hand, and the air around them seemed to warp, distorting space itself. The figure's helmet glinted in the eerie light as they spoke, their voice a low, resonant growl. "You've come too late," the figure said, the voice unmistakably female. "The artifact is ours, and soon it will be our weapon to reshape the galaxy." Nathan's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What do you want with this planet?" The figure's laugh was cold and calculating, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "I am Commander Ilara," she said, "and I am here to bring balance to the galaxy. Your species, your people, they are all destined for chaos. This artifact will give us the power to enforce order." Callus's eyes burned with fury, her jaw tightening. "You're a traitor to your people, Ilara," she spat. "You've already condemned us. If you think controlling that power will bring order, you're more deluded than I thought." Commander Ilara's head tilted slightly, as though considering Callus's words. "Your naivety is what doomed you, Callus. You never understood the true purpose of the artifact. It's not just about power. It's about control, about ensuring the survival of our species. If we don't take it, we'll be consumed by the chaos of the universe." "We'll see about that," Callus snarled. Without warning, Callus raised her arm, the exoskeleton amplifying her strength as she aimed it directly at Alara. She fired a blast of concentrated energy, a beam that shot toward the rogue commander with incredible speed. Alara deflected the blast with a swift, fluid motion, her armor flaring with defensive energy. "Is that all you have?" she taunted, her voice filled with disdain. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest as the conflict escalated. This was no longer just about the artifact, it was a fight for the future of the galaxy itself. Alara's faction was intent on using the artifact's power to bend reality to their will, reshaping the universe as they saw fit. And Callus, torn between her loyalty to her people and her sense of justice, had become the last line of defense. The ground underfoot shuddered as another tremor rattled the cave. The force from the artifact, now fully activated, seemed to ripple outward in waves. It was pulsing with energy, becoming increasingly unstable. Nathan could see the light inside the cave flickering, a chaotic storm of energy that was beginning to spiral out of control. "We need to stop this now," Nathan yelled over the rising noise, his mind racing. He could feel the distortion in the air, a tangible force tugging at the fabric of reality itself. If they didn't act fast, the consequences would be unimaginable. Callus didn't hesitate. "I'm going in," she said, her voice determined. "The artifact is linked to the cave's core. I can disable it, but I'll need a distraction. You need to hold them off." Nathan's heart clenched at the thought of her going in alone. "Are you sure? You're not fully healed." "I don't have a choice," Callus interrupted, her gaze steady. "We don't have time to argue." Before Nathan could respond, Callus sprinted toward the cave entrance, her exoskeleton whirring to life as she moved with a speed that surprised him. The rogue soldiers were closing in on her, but she was too fast, too precise, her movements a blur as she engaged them one by one. Nathan moved into position, his weapon raised as he aimed at the advancing soldiers. The air crackled with energy as the ground beneath them trembled. It was like the fabric of reality itself was warping, and every second counted. The first soldier lunged toward him, but Nathan dodged, sending a blast of energy in return. He didn't have Callus's strength, but his experience in combat was enough to keep the attackers at bay. His heart pounded in his chest as the cave entrance lit up with brilliant flashes of light from Callus's exoskeleton. "Come on, Callus," Nathan whispered to himself, gritting his teeth as another soldier closed in. Inside the cave, Callus reached the core of the artifact. The device, a twisting, glowing structure, pulsed with power. She could feel it in her bones. The connection to it was undeniable, and its influence was strong. But she had no time to dwell on its overwhelming presence. She had to act fast. Her fingers flew over the control panel, inputting the shutdown sequence with a speed that matched the urgency of the situation. The rogue soldiers were closing in, and if she didn't disable the artifact, everything they had fought for would be lost. Just as she activated the final sequence, a burst of energy erupted from the artifact, throwing her back against the cave wall. Pain shot through her, but she fought through it. The power was fading. They were winning. Nathan, fighting with everything he had, glanced toward the cave entrance, his pulse racing. Then, the lights flickered, and the ground went still. The battle was over. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.